What's up guys, American Abroad here. If you are in the market for a used motorcycle or you're looking at new bikes, I wanted to do this quick breakdown of the comparison between the Yamaha Super Tenere 1200 and the BMW GS 1200 or the BMW GS 1250. Stay tuned and let's get after it. Alright, so a couple of things to keep in mind when you're comparing these bikes. I actually have ridden a Yamaha Super Tenere 1200, the 2015 model, and so I haven't ridden a wide range of those. I've ridden 2009 BMW GS 1200, I've ridden a 2017, a 2018, and 2019 GSA and GS. So I have ridden a wider range of the GS lineup, and I'm gonna kind of break this down for you guys. I've got some footage from both bikes and a trip that I did to Colorado on a long trip. We did 12 hours in one day. If you haven't seen that video, it is on my YouTube channel. And I will say I rode the Super Tenere 1200 and it rode like a dream. The thing it corners super well. It's very comfortable and it just really does the job well. It's a workhorse, let's say that. It's a really nice workhorse. And even though at some points you probably don't have the grunt, of course, that the GS has, and you don't have as much of that make you smile throttle, right? But it's still a very capable motorcycle. And for the price point, it's really hard to beat it. You know, as far as reliability, this bike is just absolutely amazing. With the Super Tenere, let's go through a couple of details. So it is, I think it's actually on the market. It is the heaviest adventure motorcycle on the market at the moment. I'm not quite sure if it still is, but it was for a while very heavy. It's also really long. It doesn't look like it, but I think it's even just as long or even a few inches longer than a GS, which is kind of surprising because when you're looking at them, the GS kind of looks longer. It's not lacking any high-end power. Like when you're cruising on the highway, it keeps up with the other GSs. My buddy was on a GSA on this trip and it wasn't lacking any power whatsoever. That thing kept up really well. Where it does lack is in the grunt. You know, he did a lot of two-ups with his wife on the Super Tenere. He ended up transitioning to a GSA because he wanted that low-end grunt. And now being a GS owner, I can definitely compare that. It is definitely something that you lose in the Yamaha Super Tenere. Something that's a little bit strange that you do have to get used to in the Super Tenere is when you're cornering and when you do go to turn, it wants to turn, like it dives down in all the corners. And I know people like Fortnite and everybody talk about it, and they say that as you get used to it, because it is something you have to get used to because it's kind of scary the first couple times, like, whoa, this thing really wants to dip. As you get used to it, it actually makes for very fatigue-free riding. The motorcycle just really corners and everything by itself, and all you have to do is twist the throttle unless you're using the cruise control. And that's another thing. A lot of the features that come on the Yamaha Super Tenere are really great, and they're very comparable to the GS as far as comfort. You've got heaps of comfort on that bike. It rides super smooth. You have the electronic suspension, which is very nice as well. And then you have heated grips, which is incredible. The heated grips are great on that. The menu is a little bit more limited. You don't have as many ride modes. I think it's got 3 ride modes or 2 ride modes, but the ride modes are okay. I will say on the 2015 Super Tenere, you had things like, when you're riding in sport, it felt a little bit too abrupt. Like as soon as you twist the throttle, it was like, it wanted to pull you away. And when you're riding in like street mode or just like city riding, I forget what they call it, it just seemed a little bit sluggish. Like it seemed like the throttle just wasn't there. So I ended up riding in sport all the time, which isn't the most comfortable. It doesn't really roll on the throttle like the GS does. The GS is much smoother if you get into those later years. But the 2017 GS, man, that thing is just, it's really hard to ride. It's not fun. I didn't like the throttle delivery. I didn't like how it shifted. I thought the gearbox was really clunky, and it really seemed to really jerk you really hard when you shifted those gears. I know a lot of people online have complained about that as well. So something to think about. You do feel the weight in the Super Tenere quite a bit more. Whereas when you're riding the BMW GS, the weight seems to disappear as soon as you're rolling. You know, as soon as you get going, it feels like a dirt bike. It feels like a big dirt bike. I will say when we were riding in Colorado, as you can see in this video, we were actually doing some really great off-roading, and there were some really deep divots and everything in the off-road section. The off-road was really nice, but there were huge divots, like braking bumps and everything from other utility vehicles on that road, and some of them were really deep. And I thought I was gonna bottom out that suspension so many times on the Super Tenere, but it seemed to just eat up those bumps and keep chugging, and I never felt like I was gonna lose control. One thing that was really difficult off-road on the Super Tenere was I really had a hard time because you couldn't turn off traction control. And so I think there is a way to turn it off. You have to like put the bike on the center stand and put it in second gear and just let it go, and then eventually the computer airs out, and then you can ride without traction control. But that's not fun. You don't want to get on the off-road section with your buddies on a GS or on another vehicle, another whatever bike they have, and then you have to say, hang on guys while I put my bike on the center stand and run it for a few minutes until my bike airs out, and then I can ride off-road without traction control. So not being able to slide that tire around was a bit difficult. I found when I was trying to go around corners, I had to really keep the bike upright because I couldn't kind of slide that back end around. So the fun factor on off-road wasn't as fun as like the GS, where you could turn that off and just go. So that is something to consider. As far as what it feels like when you're riding the Super Tenere, you do have quite a bit of wind protection. Of course, I had a taller windscreen because this is my buddy's bike that I was riding, and he had put a really tall windscreen. And actually from the fairing of the bike, because the radiator on the Super Tenere in that year was on the side of the bike, I think it still is made that way, but it was actually really nice because it gave you kind of, even though it wasn't like the Adventure model or a huge tank, it did give you that extra fairing that did kind of snug you into the bike and make you feel more protected from the elements. So that was really nice. I really appreciated that from Yamaha. Of course, you have the dependability from Yamaha. These things, many people take these things hundreds of thousands of miles and they're still chugging. They take these things all over the place, and they are very comfortable. You can ride two up, you can put a ton of luggage on there, and it just goes. I mean, the thing just works. And it really feels like you have a ton of grip on the highway and off-road. You really feel like you have that grip, which is really nice. I was cornering a ton and didn't really have any issues. I think the Super Tenere is a bike that you can take on long trips and really enjoy. Of course, the GS is the same. The GS is actually a really capable bike, and in my opinion, everybody always makes these videos of, is this new bike that comes out a GS killer? Man, I think the only thing that at this point that can be a GS killer is another GS that's better, because the GS is just the best all-around motorcycle. I have a R1250GS, it's a 2019 model, and I absolutely love it. The bike is so smooth, it just feels like wherever you put it, it just goes. There's nothing you can give the bike that it doesn't just accept and say, yes, please give me another. I mean, the bike will just turn, it'll corner. Even if you're in a corner, if you want to move a little bit, it just goes. I came from a Triumph Tiger 800, and sometimes that thing just really didn't feel steady. This GS just, man, it just really feels steady. It'll do whatever you ask it to. It has all that smile power. You twist that throttle, it is going. You also have a nice range in the throttle though too, because on my Tiger 800 and on the Super Tenere, it's either on or off. You don't really have that point. You're either speeding up or slowing down. It's really hard to find that point where you can kind of just sit there on a lower speed or in a mid-range speed. And on the BMW GS, you have all those options in the throttle. You can kind of go a little slower if you want to go faster. It's easy to hold your momentum in those different speed ranges, which I really found amazing. And of course, you get a lot of extra creature comforts with the GS. It is a luxury motorcycle and you're paying for that, but man, it's so worth it. If you have the money to do it, I would always say go for the GS. But I think the Super Tenere has a really niche market because it's offering a lot of the features that the BMW GS does at a much lower price point. I think you can get a newer Yamaha Super Tenere for around, 14, 15,000. Whereas if a bike that's equally spec'd, a few extra features that you're missing out on, but you're also gonna pay an extra $10,000 to get those features and all of the riding modes and everything on the GS. So you're looking around 25,000. Of course, if you're buying used like I did, I picked up my GS for around 20,000 US dollars. So, you are paying for that difference. You're paying for that different experience. I think it's well worth it. The GS just feels so balanced. They both carry their weight very low down, but I will say that the Super Tenere did seem to feel a little bit heavier when I was rolling, like I talked about a minute ago. The GS corners like nothing else. I mean, it really just has unbelievable grip through everything. Of course, in the newer GS, you do have all of those things like cornering ABS, and you do have the directional headlights. I mean, you've got so many things, self-canceling blinkers. It's really, really nice. Of course, when you get to the newer Super Teneres, you are getting more creature comforts like that as well as you go up in the models and the years. But I'm comparing a 2015 to a couple different years of GSs here. So just keep that in mind. I know it may seem like not a fair comparison, but I'm gonna give some leeway, right? So here's my thing. If in the end, what bike would I go with? Of course, I own a GS. I love the 1250GS. It's an incredible motorcycle. If I was gonna choose between a 2015, and keep this in mind as well, Yamaha was using fully digital displays a couple years before the BMW was. So in the 2015 model, they have a fully digital display, whereas until you hit 2017 is when they started going fully digital with the TFT and BMW. And even then it was an option, not until 2018, then it was more regular. And I think in 2019, it just became standard. I think in 2018, you still have some models that had half digital and half analog displays. And then you go 2019 and above. And of course, TFT is just standard across the GS range. So what bike would I go with? If I was comparing, of course, the 2009 GS 1200 is a great motorcycle, but there are some creature comforts that you're getting, of course. Again, these are different year models and there's a big difference, but I would say that comparable to like a 2014 GS and things like that, you know, I just don't like the transmission in the 2014s as well. I've heard a lot of things about them. Of course, I think anything up through 2017, even a 2017 GS, I would pick a 2015 Yamaha Super Tenere above a 2017. Of course, I'm comparing different year models here, but that's what you do when you're buying a used motorcycle or a new motorcycle, is you compare all the different years. So don't slaughter me online, guys, okay? Like, I know what I'm doing here, and I know that's a little bit unfair in certain ways, but that's what you do, right? When you're looking at used motorcycles online, you're trying to figure out, okay, like, where does my price point sit where I'm willing to pay a little bit more for these features, but if I go down a year in a Yamaha Super Tenere, I'm getting the same features for less money, you know? So you just have to compare these things. So if I was gonna buy either a 2017 GS 1200 or a Yamaha Super Tenere 1200 2015, I would go with the 2015 model in those two ranges, because I just feel like the transmission is such a deal killer for me in the GS of the 2017. In the Yamaha Super Tenere 2015, it was just amazing, so I would go ahead and go with that. Anything above that, 2018 and above, I would probably choose a GS over the Yamaha Super Tenere, just because the comforts and the transmission gets so much smoother. It just becomes such a different motorcycle. I would definitely go for that. Of course, anything 2019 and above, like my motorcycles of 2019, you get the shift cam technology, which is a game changer, and as well, the throttle delivery, just everything on the bike is just so smooth. The suspension, the dynamic ESA is incredible. So of course, if you have the money, go ahead and bump up and do that. But of course, I'm comparing just these year models. I will say that I think the Yamaha Super Tenere is undervalued for what you get out of it. And honestly, the Yamaha Super Tenere is everything you want in a motorcycle at the price point that you want it to be at. I mean, this thing is just a great price point. I do think it's a great bike. And if you are in the used market, man, it's definitely a bike you should be looking at if you're looking to get into the adventure motorcycle sector. If you can't afford it, of course, I am very partial because I have an R1250GS 2019 model and I think it is the best motorcycle on the market. I'm super biased, but that's my opinion and I absolutely love it. We should all love our motorcycles. If you don't turn around and look at your bike before you walk away from it in the garage, it's not the right motorcycle, right? You should always just be looking back and saying, man, that is the bike for me. So for me, it is the R1250GS, but if you are in the market and you're looking at a couple different bikes, still consider the Yamaha Super Tenere, you know? And I do think that probably in the newer models, they've done a lot of modifications. I just haven't ridden those bikes. So I'm giving you a comparison on what I know. All right, guys, that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you have any questions or comments, definitely throw it down below. I would love to get your feedback, and please be gentle with me. I know that this is a very controversial topic and a lot of people love both of these motorcycles. So go ahead and throw some in the comments. If you are sticking around, go ahead and subscribe. Would love to be able to take you guys on the journey. I've got more videos coming in the future. So definitely hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and we'll see you next time. Ride safe, and we'll see you on the pavement.